Joining me now is Adam Eichen. He is campaign manager for Equal Citizens. Adam, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thanks so much for having me.
Adam, there's so many fun things that I want to talk to you about, and important things, including how Grassroots money beat Amazon in Seattle. That's an amazing story. I'm gonna get to that in a second. First, for folks who don't know, what is Equal Citizens?
So Equal Citizens is an organization founded by Harvard Law professor Lawrence Lessig. He was on last night talking with the show, and our basic mission is to fight for citizen equality. So fight for campaign finance reform, making sure that every American has a right to vote, ending gerrymandering, establishing ranked choice voting, and reforming the Electoral College. All the ways our democracy is broken, we're looking to fight to fix it.
So on the issue of voting rights, when it comes to the voter suppression that Republicans are doing all across the country, you guys have an interesting idea that Congress can enact legislation banning the states from doing that. Conventional wisdom says, no, it's the states that set those laws. So what are folks getting wrong?
Well, the Constitution is pretty clear. States can control state elections, but Congress very clearly has the authority to regulate congressional elections. And so earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed, or I guess earlier last year, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act. What that did is it established a federal oversight of elections in many ways, mandating things like automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, restoring voting rights to those who are convicted of felonies, all within the purview of Congress. And it's my view, and I think it's the view of Equal Citizens as well, that Democrats, Republicans, those fighting for reform need to be very clear that we need Congress to step up to ensure that every American has the right to vote. It's incredibly important what states are doing across the country to ensure the right to vote. It's incredibly important what states are doing to regulate campaign finance. But Congress does need to do its job, just like it did in 1965, to ensure with the passage of the Voting Rights Act that everybody in America had the right to vote, regardless of the color of your skin. That states' efforts to suppress the vote are unacceptable, and we can't stand for them. And Congress has that power, and it's time for them to use it.
So the Voting Rights Act analogy is very compelling. I want to get back to what the Democrats are doing in a second, but first, I noticed that Jim Sensenbrenner, a Republican from Wisconsin, introduced legislation to basically have a new Voting Rights Amendment Act. Is that real? Is there an actual Republican in the country who doesn't mind people voting?
There was a Republican bill, yes. The better bill was introduced by a Democrat, if I do say so myself. But there are people across the country that are looking to restore the Voting Rights Act. It's absolutely egregious that it hasn't been after the Supreme Court gutted it in 2013 in the Shelby County decision, which kind of gutted the pre-clearance provision, the map that determined pre-clearance, one of the most successful pieces of federal legislation in our country's history pertaining to the right to vote. But yeah, I mean, look, you look at it across the country, and when you talk to ordinary voters, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, I believe that Americans support the right to vote. Now, it's a different story when you're talking about potentially state-level Republican elected officials, where they seem to be trying to repeal and suppress the right to vote at every turn when given the chance. But the right to vote and our democracy more broadly is still an American issue.
So Adam, sorry to jump in. So you mentioned H.R. 1 earlier, and so was this confirming the right to vote nationally in congressional elections? Was it in H.R. 1?
Well, many provisions of H.R. 1 would establish federal oversight of elections in some respects, like with ensuring that every state have automatic voter registration or same-day registration. Later, the United States Congress, the House at least, passed the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act too. I mean, there are ways to go further than this. Right. Elizabeth Warren has a good plan on democracy reform that would establish, more oversight, more aggressive oversight. Sanders, likewise, has proposed a complete abolition of felon disenfranchisement. He's one of the only people in the field to go so far as to say that the right to vote should never be taken away, regardless if you're convicted of a felony. That's a very phenomenal proposal that goes beyond H.R. 1. And Sanders and a couple other candidates like Amy Klobuchar seem to be toying with a system of universal registration, such that whenever you turn 18, whenever somebody turns 18, you're automatically registered to vote. It's slightly different than what we call automatic voter registration, where you interact with a governmental agency and you are automatically registered to vote there. But there are a lot of great ideas going around. The key then is to move some of this legislation from the House to the Senate and get it past Mitch McConnell, which has proven to be a Herculean effort.
Right. I want to get on to Amazon, but I got to ask you just a little bit more about this. So this is one that all the Democrats should be united on, because it's not a progressive or moderate or conservative Democrat issue. It's whether Democrats are even allowed to vote. So it's in their self-interest. So there should be no disagreement here. So why not push for a universal registration period for all the Democrats? What's the downside?
Well, I think that that's something that is becoming more normalized among the caucus. I think that we've taken progressive steps. States across the country have passed automatic voter registration. They're the ones who led with AVR in the states, and I think that in some respects the congressional Democrats were behind on some of these policies, but now they're ready to catch up. And but look, that said, I say that jokingly. It's incredibly exciting that HR 1 passed nearly unanimously within the Democratic caucus. I think one person missed it. I think I forget who it was, wasn't present for it. But essentially every Democrat voted for it. I don't believe there was a single Republican who voted for it, unless you consider the former Democrat, now Republican in New Jersey. So maybe it is a bipartisan bill now.
Yeah, Jeff Andrew. Yeah, so look, last thing on this. So why doesn't McConnell move on it? My thesis is the mainstream media. They don't tell people that McConnell is blocking the right to vote, but which he quite literally is. And so is our main opponent here the fact that the media will call this issue 50-50, even though it is not remotely 50-50?
I mean, I think that there just has to be more awareness of the fact that Mitch McConnell is blocking HR 1. I think if you were to pull the provisions in HR 1, they're overwhelmingly possible, or positive rather. Americans approve of it. I mean, a recent poll from the New York Times a couple of years ago showed that 85% of Americans wanted fundamental change in the way we fund our elections, and HR 1 has a public financing provision in it. And if we actually really drew attention to the fact that Mitch McConnell is blocking something that the overwhelming majority of Americans would support, it may actually add some pressure to Mitch McConnell. That said, he's been very clear that he thinks that HR 1, this pro-democracy, with a small d democracy, Democratic bill, is a power play to support the big capital D Democrats. Of course, that's ridiculous. This is just a bill to enfranchise and empower everyday Americans. So he's clearly playing some political games here.
No, it's clear to people who care about facts, but to so-called reporters, they don't care about the facts. What they care about is I need access to Republicans, so I'll hide the facts from our readers, from our viewers, and pretend that Mitch McConnell also cares about democracy, and pretend that this is a 50-50 issue when, as you point out, 85% of Americans say no, McConnell is wrong. We actually think that everybody should vote. If the media covered it accurately, they would point out that McConnell is against voting rights, but instead they cover for him and aid and abet his anti-democratic principles. Okay, that's my opinion. It's clear. Let's move on to Amazon. What was Amazon trying to do in Seattle, and then how did we beat it back?
So I think the story of Amazon is one of the most fascinating and encouraging stories of the last local elections in 2019. Amazon and a coalition of big business in Seattle spent about $4 million to try and influence the city council there. This is after the city council tried to impose a head tax on Amazon and like-minded businesses, big businesses, to try and get some revenue from them. Amazon fought back. The city council repealed the tax. It's a long story, and Amazon said, that's not enough. It's not enough. We won. We're going to try and take over the city council. Now, Seattle in 2015 passed a public financing system in which every resident gets 4 $25 vouchers that they can give to any eligible local candidate for office. And this public financing system, it was remarkably successful in 2017. And in 2019, almost every single candidate ran on vouchers. And what these vouchers did is it gave every progressive candidate who was running against Amazon a chance to be a viable candidate. It gave them the necessary money to start their campaign, be a viable candidate, and run for office successfully. And in the end, Amazon lost in 5 of the 6 places where there was a clear pro-Amazon candidate and an anti-Amazon candidate. So this is a remarkable success story of the power of public financing of elections.
Yeah, I love that story, and it's super encouraging. It's only $25. I think the democracy dollars that Andrew Yang talks about is a similar proposal, even better, arguably. Jill Brandon wanted to make it $600. Totally agree. But can I hear 1,000? But I want to, Adam, I want to get a sense of scale. So Amazon spent $4 million and still lost. I don't know if you know this specific fact. How much were the people who were taking the public financing vouchers able to raise?
I would have to double check that for you, but I mean, they were able to raise not quite enough to compete with all the outside spending. Again, Amazon spent about 1.5 in conjunction with a larger business coalition of 4 million. So the candidates and both sides, the kind of Amazon candidates and the anti-Amazon candidates, both accepted for the most part these vouchers. So again, the vouchers extended to both sides of this debate. But what it did is it created a threshold to run that viable campaign. And in the end, they were released from their spending limits and were able to raise more from the grassroots. And one of the things here that's so amazing about these vouchers is it's not just the public money, right? It's also about the ways in which when you actually give in Seattle 4 $25 vouchers to everyday voters, they all of a sudden become politically interested in many respects, right? It gives them a sense that their voice matters, and that may well have increased the amount that they were paying attention to politics, or municipal politics, that is. Because what you also saw is, in addition to vouchers, you saw a proliferation of small dollar donations as well. So in addition to the vouchers. So more research has to be done on this story, but it may well have been that these public financing vouchers actually really encouraged civic engagement in a way that might have been unprecedented there.
All right, one super last thing. I think that it being an quote unquote Amazon candidate is just about the saddest thing in the world. Were they all Republicans or were they Democrats too?
Oh, it's Seattle, so a lot of these people were pretty progressive for the national politics. So it really was a defined case of local politics. It wasn't quite along the left-right split.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were progressive. I would say they were people pretending to be Democrats while being Amazon candidates, something we do see all across the country. Okay, Adam Eichen from Equal Citizens, thank you for joining us. Great conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.